In today's video, we're talking about some NHL trade rumors, focusing on guys like Jonathan Quick and Claude Giroux, plus the possibility of the New York Islanders adding to their blue line ahead of the NHL trade deadline. We also have another suspension to talk about, more waivers news, and a huge signing in Boston with Charlie McAvoy inking an 8-year deal. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news and rumors to cover here in this video, so certainly I want to pay close attention because there is a lot to cover. Let's kick things off with news from the NHL waiver wire. We have the Los Angeles Kings placing young defenseman Christian Wolanin on waivers for the purpose of being assigned. Obviously, Wolanin started his NHL career with the Ottawa Senators after playing a few years of college hockey. Struggled to find a consistent spot in Ottawa. I know Sens fans were not overly thrilled when he was eventually dealt to the Kings in exchange for Michael Amadio. Of course, Amadio spent the end of last year in Ottawa. Didn't really work out the best, and he was let go, and he eventually signed and essentially is like the 12th or 13th forward now with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But Wolanin has fallen out of favor in LA very quickly. Obviously, they had a lot of defensemen ahead of him. I guess the hope was he could kind of grab a third pair spot. But he hasn't really been able to do that. He's essentially right now on the roster kind of like a number 7 spot defenseman for LA. They have some other young guys who could probably play that role as well and get some experience, like Jordan Spence or Sean Durzi. I guess they would rather assign him to the minors, so this isn't great for his career. Another bump in the road here, but and we'll see if he can get himself back on track. But it wouldn't be surprising if they do try to find him another home to try to land on his feet here and see if he can find his game long enough to get a regular spot in the NHL. A quick update, just to update things from yesterday. We talked about Landeskog. He was eventually suspended for 2 games. In the video, I talked about the thoughts that I thought it was probably going to be 3. Or maybe even more. I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest, that it was only 2, especially where he does have some history, and I really thought that was completely unnecessary. But Landeskog will be out for 2 more games, and we have another situation where I wasn't sure if we'd have the hearing and results before the video was recorded today, but Dylan Larkin has been suspended for 1 game after last night's affair with the Tampa Bay Lightning, which was a wild game. The Red Wings had a huge lead. The Lightning came back. The Red Wings essentially collapsed in the third period in about 7 minutes and ended up losing 7-6 in overtime. But Matthew Joseph, in my opinion, came in with a really dirty, unnecessary hit on Larkin. Larkin retaliated with a reach where he reaches sucker punch Joseph right in the face. So essentially, a little context here. I don't blame Larkin for being pissed. For one, it's a hit that shouldn't have happened, and it's also a hit in an area where he had, end of season surgery last year. Like when he ended his season early last year, it's the same area that he was hurt in. Spent a lot of time recovering, and he's probably kind of sensitive about that. You don't want people targeting an area that you just recovered from a significant injury from. But at the same time, like if he would have, instead of reaching to punch him and sucker punching him, if he would have been able to grab him and punch him, and then they could have, had a bit of a fight, it would have been a better way to handle it, because then that would have probably been classified as fighting. He might have been given an instigator penalty, but it likely wouldn't have gone as far as supplementary discipline. Like, to be honest, I think the Joseph hit, I'm not sure it's really suspendable an offense myself, but it certainly was not great. And it was, at the end of the day, like I understand. It just, unfortunately in the NHL, you can't react that way. If they would have reacted differently and just had a fight over it, but a fight's a 2-sided thing, and sucker punch is not. So Dylan Larkin will miss 1 game for those efforts to sucker punch Matthew Joseph. Also had some other quick news I want to update everybody on as well. Of course, we saw the huge news in Ottawa yesterday with the Brady Tkachuk signing. A couple quick things with that contract that we didn't know the details at the time, but even though he's got a 7-year deal at 8.2 and change, which we did know and discussed in the video yesterday. However, a couple of things that really make this enticing and really good for the player is that it's the middle years of the contract is where he makes the most money, when the escrow is going to be at its lowest. So we already know that. So it goes like $4 million, then it goes, I think, 6, and then he's got like 3 years of 10 plus. So he's going to make the most money when the escrow is the lowest, which means he keeps more of his money. That's certainly something that's important to a lot of top-end players, especially. As I mentioned, he does have a no trade in the UFA years of the deal, no signing bonuses, which was important to Ottawa. And it sounds like a big part of this was to kind of convince Tkachuk, that they're ready to commit to this group and that they'll have the resources made available to them to sign all the guys he enjoys playing with and thinks are going to be huge parts of the future, like Stützle and Norris, which will be the next two guys to get done here over the next year. Norris really could be any time. Stützle is going to be another year, of course, before he's even eligible to do that one. And it sounds like Dorian might want to get a head start on Norris's contract. Wouldn't be shocked if that's done sometime this year if the player and agent, who he actually has the same agent as Brady, if they're willing to discuss that. Speaking of Brady, of course, he did make an appearance last night at the rink. They did it in grand fashion. He was not there in time for the opening ceremonies when they introduced the full team. They were hoping to have him there to bring him out, but that didn't happen with his flights. He ended up flying into Montreal as the best he could do. Then he had to drive from Montreal to Ottawa, so he was there probably 20-25 minutes after the game started. But they brought him out on their stage area where they actually had a band playing for all Canada, which was the Trues last night. They brought him out to actually played Stone Cold Steve Austin's music from the WWE. Really made a big spectacle out of it. Crowd went nuts, and then of course he got to see everybody. Did lots of media afterwards. He was on the ice first thing this morning ahead of with the team, so for practice. So he was working hard. Word is he is going to travel with the team because they're going to Toronto for a rematch against the Maple Leafs tomorrow night. Likely not going to play there, but he could play as early as Sunday when they return home to play the Dallas Stars. And if they decide to hold off and give him the weekend off to get more practice and conditioning, then they don't play for like another 3 or 4 days after that against the San Jose Sharks at home as well. So he will definitely play by next week at the absolute latest, but wouldn't be shocking at all if he's in the lineup this weekend against Dallas. I wouldn't even be shocked if they could do a last-minute thing and put him in against the Leafs tomorrow night. But then again, I don't know. We'll have to see. But I mean, he was certainly working hard, had a lot of ice time and skating sessions with the United States National Team Development Program, which is where Hughes and Pettersson were also skating with while they were waiting for their deals to get done. So he should be in pretty good shape. He says he's added a lot of strength, didn't really add a lot of weight, but looks like he's in great shape. So he should be in the lineup here soon. Also, last night we saw a tribute to fallen goaltender in Columbus, Matiss Kivlienicks, of course, who tragically passed away this past offseason. Of course, his very close friend, Elvis Merzlikins, wanted to honor him. Of course, the team honored them last night. His family was present, and the Jackets did not disappoint with a huge win. It was very emotional watching Elvis pay tribute to his friend, especially after the game, have him look up, say this one's for you. They certainly, did a great job, I thought, of honoring the goaltender who tragically passed away, and certainly could see what kind of impact he had on so many of his teammates. And the Jackets did, played an awesome game in his honor. Speaking of goaltenders, we've seen a lot of goalie injuries around the NHL as of late. We got word this morning that John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks is going to be out for a little while with a lower body injury, so that's not good. Obviously, we got Peter Mrazek for the Leafs. He went down last night late in the second period. He stretched out to make a save, and you could tell he didn't look comfortable getting up. We wondered if it might have been a groin issue, and he didn't come out for the third period. Jack Campbell had to take over. I thought Mrazek played well. The Leafs didn't do the greatest in front of him early on, so they get down 3-0. They came back, made a game of it 3-2, but ultimately dropped that game to the Senators. But of course, the Sens were also riding on the whole momentum from Brady's return and all that too. So made for a pretty good game, but not great for Mrazek in that sense. So I know with the Leafs goaltending duo, that's my concern. They have two good goaltenders. They're very capable. They could be a very good tandem, but they both do have a history of dealing with injuries and not being able to stay healthy. If anything happens to Campbell while Mrazek's out, then they're going to be in trouble. So I know Hutchinson, I believe, is being called up to the Leafs to back up Jack Campbell now. I'm not sure exactly at this point. We don't have a time frame on what Mrazek's dealing with, but it looked like a groin. We know Mackenzie Blackwood in New Jersey is not ready yet. He had some kind of procedure on his heel in the offseason. It's not quite healed up as of yet, and he's going to probably miss at least the first few games of the season. And even Varlamov with the Islanders is still out. He's not ready, and Barry Trotz indicated as soon as he's able to play, he'll join a team and get a start whenever he's able to do that. But for right now, they're riding with Sorokin and Schneider. So Varley will be out for a little while here yet as well. Now, of course, one of the big news items of the day, Charlie McAvoy inking an 8-year deal with the Boston Bruins. They were really hoping to get this done before the season started. Of course, the season technically has started, but the Bruins haven't played their first game here as of yet. That doesn't go until tomorrow. But they've signed McAvoy to an 8-year contract for $76 million. Gives them an average annual value of $9.5 million. That's Certainly some big money for McAvoy. You can certainly thank some of the other defensemen this past offseason for really driving up the D market. It's crazy what some of these guys are getting paid. Zach Werenski basically has pretty well the same contract. Obviously, Werenski and McAvoy, very comparable in a lot of statistics. Obviously, Werenski certainly scores more goals, but when it comes to role and minutes, age, etc., of course, we saw the Seth Jones contract be right around that same amount as well. Not sure that that's quite the same. And you get Dougie Hamilton too, but see, Jones and Hamilton a little bit older than McAvoy or Werenski. To me, this is as much as I'm not going to say that McAvoy's not worth the money. It's risky though, in my opinion. If you look at McAvoy, based on the last couple of years not being full years, like his career high, based on the last couple of years, like he would have been on pace for about a 40-point defenseman. That's not overly offensive. Now, I know with some defensemen, they get paid for more than just putting up points. He does play a huge role. Top pair guy there. Obviously, get to learn from Chera for a long time. He's a great defenseman, plays a huge role. But we've seen a lot of the guys in Boston, take less and be more, leave money on the table to make more of a winning team. Like, he's going to be the highest paid player in Bruins history and by quite a bit. I mean, if you look at what like Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak, like those contracts are all like $3 million less. I mean, Krejci made a little bit more than they did, but not by a ton. This is just out of character for Boston to really pay a player this much money. So they really opened the vault here for McAvoy. So we'll see. Obviously, it's a changing of the guard. The NHL younger players are not all taking the same kind of approach here as a lot of the other generation before them, where they want to get paid what they're valued at and paid what they're worth. Obviously, other teams have it too. I'm not saying that it's completely out of character across the league. It's just out of character for Boston, and it's just surprised me. I really didn't know that McAvoy would be worth 9.5, but based on the market and the other contracts that we can compare it to, I can understand why his agents would be pushing those as comparables and say, listen, if those guys are worth that much, then he is too, right? Now, I'll tell you the player who wins the most in this is probably Rangers defenseman Adam Fox is probably sitting back watching this D market and including the McAvoy deal with a huge smile on his face. I'm sure he's a happy guy anyway, knowing he's going to have a huge payday coming very soon, but obviously, Fox is going to need a new contract by next year. And really, Adam Fox is the same age as McAvoy. Doesn't have the amount of NHL games McAvoy does because he stayed in college longer. Both U.S. college players. McAvoy came out much sooner. Fox played 2 extra years. So like I said, he doesn't have the number of reps. But he was on pace for 70 points last year. Won a Norris Trophy. So if McAvoy can command that kind of money, can you imagine what Fox is going to command? They've already got in the Rangers, they've got Trouba making $8 million. That's, in my opinion, that's too much. But still, like, I think based on what we've seen what the Rangers do with Zibanejad and what they have to do with Fox, we can confirm. I'll be shocked if they're still in on Eichel, but I really don't see how they could have Panarin, Zibanejad, Fox, Trouba making all this money and still try to squeeze in an Eichel contract as well. I just don't think it's remotely possible. So based on all those factors, I think that's that. But Fox is going to get paid handsomely. If McAvoy's making 9.5 or Werenski and Jones and these guys, you got to think he's going to be asking for 10 or more, right? Maybe 10 and a half. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be a huge number, and I'll be surprised if it's anything less. But at the end of the day, Adam Fox is, I'm sure, quite happy with how things have developed on the D market between the offseason and what we've seen early here so far this year. Now, before we go any further in the video, I do need to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. And guess what? Hockey fans are buzzing because hockey is back. Want to know what else is buzzing? The Lawnmower 4.0 from our friends at Manscaped, who are the global leaders in male grooming, trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. I highly recommend the Performance Package 4.0, which includes their new state-of-the-art Lawnmower 4.0, as well as some other great features. The lawnmower itself has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction switch that can engage as a travel lock, gives you the ability to turn on an LED spotlight as well for a more precise shave. Also, as I've mentioned on numerous occasions before, Manscaped is about much more than just a trimmer. They have everything, all aspects aspects covered and male grooming, including some great formulations like their brand new ultra premium body wash to keep you smelling great all day long. It's certainly a big hit here. I absolutely love it. They also have other exfoliators and gels to keep all aspects of your grooming needs covered. I highly recommend you check out manscaped.com. Use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using promo code TSH. So thanks very much for watching that promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. On to some NHL trade talk here for today. I do want to touch on the New York Islanders and some information that Arthur Staple's been talking about here over the past few days with The Athletic. Staple talking about the fact that they did not obviously sign Erik Gustafsson. Many thought when he went to Isles camp on a PTO that there was a good chance he might get signed. Obviously, they had to move Nick Leddy for cap purposes this past year, but that does leave a hole on the left side of their blue line. It does leave somebody who's, ideally that they'd like to have help on a power play, eat up some of those minutes. They brought in Zdeno Chara, but, Chara at his age likely isn't going to play every game. He's not really a power play guy anymore. It's just not the same kind of defenseman, right? And they also have Chara and Andy Green back there, both elder statesmen, and like I said, you need to rotate them in and out of the lineup, make sure they're fresh, and it can be problematic, I think, at times having them both be in there if they're not at their best, right? So at the end of the day, adding a left shot defenseman who can be a little bit more offensive and lug some bigger minutes for them, it's always been a priority. It's just been a challenge to do. So I think it's fair to say that with them not signing Gustafsson, which was Staple's been alluding to in this article, that they're likely still wanting to do it because it's important. It's an important piece they're missing, but it's going to have to be something that they address likely via trade as the season goes on, sometime between now and the NHL trade deadline. And a couple of names that were out there. One was Matiss, but of course he's re-signed in Nashville now, and really he's not going to give you that offense. He's not going to help on the power play. So as much as he's a good defenseman and might have been able to help on a short-term basis, I don't really know that he's the absolute best option there, but the main one that I personally have been predicting would be great for a while, and it's mentioned in this article, is Ducks defenseman Hampus Lindholm. Many feel, including Elliot Friedman, who's mentioned it in his recent podcast, that the Ducks could be one of the big power brokers in the NHL trade market this season, with likely moving some vets out like Lindholm, like Josh Manson, like Rickard Rakell. Maybe Ryan Getzlaf gets traded because he only signed a short-term deal. There's lots of guys there that are veteran guys who could be interesting for other teams to add ahead of the deadline. And Lindholm could be that left shot D who can do all those things that the Islanders really need. Of course, it's going to boil down to price. I mean, I know right now they have a guy like Kiefer Bellows who they don't want to put through waivers, so they don't want to lose him. Could he maybe be a trade chip? That's just me, spitballing. I don't really have any reason to know that they're any speculation that's a piece that would be involved. We don't even know that the Islanders and the Ducks are talking. That's not where things are at. It's just, speculating that he would be the ideal candidate for the Islanders to target, and that it makes a ton of sense here. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on cap. It's going to depend on a lot of things here. But if they get closer to the trade deadline, teams are going to be more willing on these pending UFA players to retain some salary and be able to make things work for trade. So I think it's probably best in the Islander and lose strategy here to kind of wait things out. But the only problem is if you wait too long and your team struggles, it can be problematic because you can't do damage in the playoffs if you can't get there. And I know myself and many people have predicted the Islanders have a solid year and be a cup contender, which I still think they are and can do. But starting the season on a 13-game road trip while they wait for their new building to be ready could be an issue. If they get off to a really slow start, you're not going to win the cup in October. You're not going to make the playoffs in October. But you can lose out on all that in October if you really have a horrendous start. So let's hope for their sake that they can get things turned around. And I don't suspect, though, that we'll see Lou kind of make a panic trade. That's not his style. So I still think what happens later on. But I think Lindholm is the ideal guy there. Now, of course, the LA Kings decided to go with Cal Peterson in their opening game. Obviously, it looks like it's a changing of the guard over Jonathan Quick. So Quick has been the starting goaltender on opening night for quite a few years now. We know Peterson signed an extension that kicks in next year for a significant raise, making comparable money to Jonathan Quick. But obviously, it looks like the tides are turning here as early as this year. I think they're still going to be considered a 1A, 1B, but Peterson's the A, Quick is the B, instead of vice versa. Now, could that generate some interest in Jonathan Quick as a trade piece this year. There's certainly teams out there that would appreciate his pedigree and appreciate the fact that he's a pending UFA, so they don't have a long-term commitment. It could be an interesting, addition ahead of the NHL deadline, even though goaltenders are not, usually huge factors at the deadline. Honestly, if it was going to happen, it would probably happen sooner than later. But at the same time, I'm not sure the Kings are going to want to rush into that, because if they are able to make the playoffs, and I do think with the Pacific Division being fairly open, that they're going to want to wait and see how things are looking for them, because if they can get into the playoffs, they probably would prefer to have Jonathan Quick and Peterson, right? Because you can never have too much depth in playoff time. So, especially where at the stage of Quick's career, he's not going to generate a huge return in a trade, right? So, they'd be better off to use him as an own rental if they can get in. So, I don't see this trade happening anytime soon. But at the same time, I do think that it's a remote possibility that we could see because of Quick falling to being the number 2 guy in the chart. Doesn't have a lot of term left on his contract. Doesn't make a ton of money. Doesn't have any trade protection. You look around like teams like the Oilers, who we mentioned, and might be interested in a guy like Korpisalo, maybe even John Gibson. We also don't know that the Ducks are really in a hurry to trade Gibson either. So Quick certainly would be more likely, I would think. So to me, we don't really have any reports suggesting that the Kings are shopping Jonathan Quick, but with the developments there in their goalie depth chart, you have to think that teams are likely going to be inquiring and be curious to see if something materializes that we could see Quick maybe change uniforms this year. And lastly here, I want to touch on Flyers captain Claude Giroux. Now, it's been widely reported on a variety of sources here that Giroux and his agent and the Philadelphia Flyers are not going to be talking about a contract extension until possibly the end of the season. He is in the final year of that long-term deal that he signed with the Flyers, which doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but it's actually coming to an end. Of course, the Flyers are a team that's, as much as they retooled a lot this offseason, there's certainly a little bit of team in transition. We saw them wanting to shake things up. Jake Voracek was moved, and I'm not completely sold on the idea that Giroux will be a Flyer longer term. I wouldn't rule it out that he does stay, but there is some talk that if he does want to be traded this year, and that's always only going to depend on where the Flyers stand in the standings. If the Flyers are going to be looking to make the playoffs, and they could do that, then certainly there's no reason for them to trade him. He'll ride things out. I know Flyers reporter Al Morganti was reporting earlier that he felt the only team that Claude Giroux would want to be traded to during the season before the deadline, if he were to be moved, would be the Ottawa Senators, since that's technically his hometown. If the Sens were looking to go to the playoffs and the Flyers were not, that might be something that he would entertain. And we've also seen other sources in Ottawa who claim to say that, according to what they know, that Giroux would really like to play for his hometown Senators at some point before he calls it a career, whether that comes via trade this year sometime or it's potentially signing as an unrestricted free agent either next offseason or depending on, in the future sometime, I guess we could say. But at this point, like I said, a lot of people are kind of, hesitant to put the Flyers as being a playoff team. It's really difficult to say exactly what they're going to be this year. I know they've made a lot of changes, but are those changes going to be enough to get them in the playoffs in a really tight Metro division? It's certainly debatable, and it's an interesting thought to see about him maybe going home to Ottawa. Obviously, there have been talk for some time now about them wanting to add a veteran center to be able to work with guys like Norris and Pinto and take the pressure off and kind of, create some more depth there with mixing in a veteran guy. And he could certainly do that. I know Giroux has played center and wing a lot through his career, so he could be using a variety of options depending on how everybody's doing, where he would slot best in the lineup. And it's hard to imagine a deal like this absolutely for sure going down. But if we go into the year and it's getting near the deadline and the Flyers are out of it and Ottawa's hanging on, it could be something that we see pull off, but it wouldn't be shocking either for the Sens to possibly wait, if they do have interest, to be able to talk to him in the offseason about maybe coming home as a UFA. That might be more likely, so they don't have to give up any assets. The Senators by no means are a guarantee for the playoffs. I think they can challenge for playoffs, but it's a long season. It's hard to say. And if they're in that predicament near the deadline, but even if they are they going to want to spend to add? Because, if they're going to be a playoff team, you would think they probably would maybe just squeak in. I can't see them being like a top team, above teams like Tampa and Florida especially. So it may not make sense for them to do that. But at some point, rumor has it, Giroux in Ottawa is something that he would like to see happen before his career is over. Could it happen this year or next offseason as a UFA? Only time will tell. So let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here below in the comments section. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.